My name is Margaret Hayes, and I never planned on coming back to Cedar Lake. But life has a strange way of pulling you toward the places you've been trying to forget. I was 52 when the letter came, a simple legal notice that my parents' cabin by the lake had officially become mine. They'd passed years ago, but the property had been tangled in paperwork. I could have sold it right away, but something inside me said, go see it first. So I packed up my car, drove through 2 states, and crossed the wooden sign that still read, "Welcome to Cedar Lake, a good place to call home." It hadn't changed much. The same narrow roads, the same diner with the same flickering neon light, the same feeling that time here moved slower than anywhere else. But for me, Cedar Lake wasn't home. It was the place where my best friend disappeared. Her name was Lily Parker, and the last time anyone saw her was the night of the summer fair, August 12, 1989. We were 17, full of plans. I remember that night like a scar you can't stop tracing with your fingers. Lily wore a white sundress. She laughed too loud, danced with everyone, and said she'd meet me by the lake after the fireworks. But she never showed up. The search lasted weeks. The sheriff said she probably ran away. Her parents said she'd never do that, and me? I waited by that lake every evening until the leaves started to turn red. Then I left. When I reached the cabin this time, it felt smaller. The paint had peeled, the porch creaked, and the air smelled like pine and rain-soaked wood. Inside, everything was frozen in time. The same photo frames, the same brown armchair my dad used to sit in, the same silence. I started cleaning. And that's when I found it. In the top drawer of my father's desk, a small metal box, locked with an old paperclip. Inside there was a camera film roll labeled Summer '89. My heart stopped. Dad used to take pictures at the fair every year. He said he loved capturing simple joy. But this roll, this one, was never developed. Next morning, I drove to the next town's photo lab. The guy behind the counter looked at me funny when I handed him that old roll. "Vintage," he said. "Yeah," I replied, trying not to tremble. "Just old memories." When I picked up the photos, there were 12 shots. Most were harmless. Fireworks, kids eating cotton candy, my mom by the Ferris wheel. And then, the last one. It was Lily, standing by the lake. Her smile soft, her hair shining under the fair lights. And next to her, a man wearing a sheriff's jacket. Not my father, not Sheriff Willis either. He was much older. This man's face was turned away, but his badge number, 714, was clear. I drove back to town, straight to Sheriff Willis's house. He was retired now, gray-haired and slow-moving, sitting on his porch with a cup of coffee. When he saw me, his smile faded. "Margaret Hayes," he said. "Haven't seen you since your dad's funeral." I handed him the photo. He studied it for a long moment, his eyes flicking back and forth. Finally, he said softly, "Where did you find this?" "In my father's desk." He took a long breath. "Your dad was a good man. He tried to protect you." "From what?" I asked. He looked down, set his cup aside, and said, "Sometimes the truth doesn't heal, Margaret. Sometimes it just opens old wounds." I left before my tears could show. That night, I sat by the lake, the same dock where Lily and I used to sit, legs dangling in the water, dreaming about leaving this town. The air was colder than I remembered, and in that silence I whispered, "Lily, what really happened to you?" A ripple formed on the water. Maybe just the wind, maybe not. Somewhere behind me, a branch snapped. I turned, but no one was there, just the woods, the crickets, and that familiar feeling that Cedar Lake was still hiding something. The next morning I drove into town for groceries, but the looks I got said enough. People remembered me, and they remembered Lily. When small towns bury something, they bury it deep, and anyone digging around is a problem. At the checkout counter, old Mrs. Keller leaned close. "You shouldn't stay up at that cabin too long." "Margaret," she whispered. "Bad memories make bad dreams." I just smiled. I already have those. Back at the cabin, I made coffee, sat at Dad's desk again, and started going through the rest of his papers. Bills, receipts, a few letters, and tucked between them, an envelope marked Sheriff's Office, August 1989. Inside was a short police report. Half the lines were blacked out, but one sentence burned through. Deputy Earl Banning, last seen with subject Lily Parker at Lakeside. 11:42 p.m. Deputy Banning. That name used to mean nothing. Now it was the man in the picture, and a badge 714. I found an old phone book in the drawer. Looked him up. He'd moved north to a town called Maple Harbor, 2-hour drive. I didn't think twice. The highway felt endless, lined with pines and ghosts. By the time I reached Maple Harbor, the sun was sliding down behind the trees. I found his address in a rundown cabin near another lake. Smaller, lonelier. Typical, I thought. People like him always end up near water. He opened the door halfway. A thin man with white hair and eyes that had seen too much. "Yes," he said. "My name's Margaret Hayes. Cedar Lake." The name froze him. After a pause, he sighed and said, "Come in." The house smelled like dust and old regrets. Photos of fishing trips hung crooked on the wall. I laid the picture of Lily on the table. "Why were you with her that night?" I asked. He stared at it for so long I almost thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he whispered, "It was an accident. Those words never mean what you hope they mean." "She called me out there," he said. "She said someone had been following her. She was scared. I told her I'd meet her by the dock." He rubbed his hands over his face. "She started panicking, said she'd tell the sheriff, tell your father. I tried to calm her down, grabbed her arm, and she slipped. Hit her head on the rocks." He swallowed hard. "She was gone before I could reach her. I felt the world tilt. And my father? Your dad found out the next morning," he said. "He came to me before the sheriff did. Said if we told the truth, the whole town would eat me alive. Said Lily's parents didn't deserve to know she fell, they needed to believe she was somewhere better." He looked at me then, eyes wet. "He took her. He buried her himself, out there near the North Shore. Said he'd handle it." I couldn't breathe. All those years I thought my father was the kindest man alive. Maybe he still was, in his own broken way, but kindness can turn cruel when it protects the wrong thing. Earl reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Why tell me now?" I asked. "Because you came," he said simply. "Nobody ever comes back." I drove back before dawn, headlights cutting through fog. When the lake came into view, the first light was touching the water, silver and still. I parked near the North Shore. The air smelled like wet earth and pine needles. There was a small wooden cross there, weathered, almost invisible under the moss, no name, just a faint carving. LP. I knelt, ran my fingers over the letters, and for the first time in 30 years, I let myself cry. Not the quiet tears of guilt, the kind that shake your whole chest. I whispered, "I'm sorry, Lily, for leaving, for not knowing. For every year I stayed away." A breeze moved through the trees, soft and warm. The lake rippled once like it was breathing with me. When I finally stood up, the world felt lighter, not fixed, just lighter. That evening I walked into the diner. Same cracked counter, same smell of coffee and pie. A few heads turned, waiting to see if I'd say something dramatic. I just ordered black coffee and a slice of lemon meringue. Lily's favorite, Mrs. Keller, came over pretending to wipe the counter. "So," she said, "did you find what you were looking for?" I looked out the window toward the fading lake light. "Yeah," I said, "and it wasn't what I expected." She nodded slowly. "It never is, honey. I sold the cabin a month later, but I kept one thing, Dad's old camera. Sometimes I still take it out, just to hear the click of the shutter. That sound reminds me that time moves on, but pictures keep the truth waiting, even if we're not ready for it. Now I live a few hours away, in a small apartment with too many plants and not enough noise. But every August, on the 12th, I drive back to Cedar Lake. I sit on the dock, lay a single white lily on the water and watch it drift toward the North Shore. People think healing comes from forgetting. It doesn't. It comes from facing what we left behind, and finally letting it rest. So if you ever find yourself standing by a quiet lake, and the wind feels like a memory brushing past your face, listen closely, because sometimes the past doesn't haunt you. Sometimes it just wants to be heard.